Hi everyone, Jim here from Becoming a PT, and in today's video we're talking all about the supplies and equipment you're going to need heading into PT school. Alright, now before we start talking about the actual kind of PT specific supplies and gear that you're going to need for PT school, it might just help you to know and kind of put your mind at ease that there's really not a whole lot of actual equipment that you're going to need. And the few things that you are going to need, they actually don't really cost a whole heck of a lot. And that's pretty good news because you're kind of paying an arm and a leg for PT school with the cost of your tuition and kind of, everything else involved. So it should just help you kind of know that there's not really a whole lot you're going to need. And it might be different from school to school. Like everyone's kind of school and kind of requirements might be a little bit different about what you're going to need to purchase. But, what we're going to cover today is the equipment that, I needed while I was in PT school. And it's for sure, kind of very just staple, rudimentary stuff. And again, doesn't cost much. So let's get right into it. All right, now the first thing that you're going to need, and you're going to use this a lot throughout PT school, is a gait belt. There we go. And again, when it comes to, equipment, something like a gait belt, not going to cost you a whole lot, but you're going to need it for all sorts of courses. Your neuro rehab courses, maybe some geriatric courses, and especially your kind of basic skill courses where you're just learning how to use not only a bunch of basic equipment, but the basic techniques that come with that. So a gait belt doesn't really cost a whole heck of a lot, but you will use it a lot. And pro tip, you see on mine, I've got my last name put on it because I found out in PT school that, when you wind up, purchasing the same equipment that everyone else purchases, people kind of confuse like your equipment for theirs and then your stuff goes missing. So there's a pro tip for you. Just make sure that you put, your name on whatever equipment you can, and then it might save you some headaches. All right, so now that we've talked about the gait belt, the other pieces of equipment that you're gonna need are gonna be things like, goniometers, if you can see those there. So this would be a large goniometer, and again, goniometer is kind of a goofy name, so let's, I just call it something even more goofy. I call it a science stick. If nothing else, it usually gets some laughs out of people. So you got a large science stick, and then you have a small science stick. And again, this would be for kind of smaller joints, whereas this is more for larger joints, hips and shoulders, more kind of fingers, maybe ankles, things like that. Again, they don't cost a whole heck of a lot. They're dirt cheap, so that's good to know. All right, so it's likely that you're gonna also need a Reflex Hammer. And again, that's a dirt cheap little thing, but really important to have. You're gonna need it most likely for your basic skills courses, learning how to do your neuro evals. Again, doesn't cost a whole heck of a lot, but just, really, really good for learning for deep tendon reflexes, a couple other things that you can do with them. So one of those gonna be important to have. All right, now just kind of firing right on down the list, the next thing that you're gonna likely need is a stethoscope. Now, when it comes to stethoscopes, you don't have to get like the most like super kind of high-end ones. It might not be a bad idea if you do plan on going into like cardiopulmonary PT, but for the vast majority of students, including myself, you just need something that's gonna get the job done. And so this is a Prestige Medical stethoscope. It's got the diaphragm and the bell on it. Doesn't cost a whole lot, and again, it does a reasonable job for kind of letting you to be able to hear, your different kind of lung sounds and heart sounds. Maybe if you get something really dirt cheap, you can't hear a whole lot, but something mid-range like this does the job just fine for PT school. All right, and then of course, if you're getting a stethoscope, you're likely gonna also have to pick up one of these bad boys. Now, by these bad boys, I mean a sphygmomanometer, which is a terrible name. So again, blood pressure cuff is kind of what most people want to be calling this. And again, this is a Prestige Medical sphygmomanometer, blood pressure cuff. I hate that word, so I'm just gonna stop. All right, so a couple other pieces of equipment worth talking about that you're likely going to need, not necessarily throughout all of PT school, but when it comes to your gross anatomy course, you're likely gonna need a pair of medical scrubs, which are it's the type of clothing that you wear when you're going into an environment where you're gonna get a lot of fluid or just kind of stuff all over your attire. Medical scrubs, some schools might actually include them in your tuition fees and supply them for you, which is what my school did, but it might also be that you're expected to pick up your own. But again, the medical scrubs don't cost a whole lot. You can order them online, you can pick them up at a couple of different stores. So you'll likely need some scrubs for gross anatomy, and you're likely going to need to supply your own gloves when you're doing your dissections, as well as razor blades for the scalpels that you'll be using. Now again, every school is a bit different, so your school might cover gloves, might cover scalpels, razor blades, that type of thing. But when it comes to gross anatomy, at least for our school, we went through so many gloves, so many razor blades that our school just expects us to supply ourselves with those. But thankfully they don't cost a whole heck of a lot, so that's nothing too much to worry about. All right, now it's also worth mentioning that when it comes to the supplies that you're going to need, there's a couple of things to think about here. First of all, you likely don't want to rush out and pick all these up right away before school starts, because again, maybe your school will actually either supply you with some of these, or maybe you, for whatever reason, can get them elsewhere. So let's kind of talk about a couple of those things real quick. The first thing is, I would wait until you're actually in school and your professors kind of let you know what you're going to need. Now, the reason being for that is, sometimes schools will actually kind of supply like all the equipment for you, and then you just have to make a purchase, and then you kind of get it all in one purchase. Now that can be quite handy. That's kind of what our school did, and so we kind of got this like medical student kind of supply discount that came along with that, which is quite nice. So I would definitely kind of wait and until your instructors kind of let you know what you're going to need before you just kind of start rushing out and buying everything. Now the other reason for that is because, again, you can think about, maybe ways that you could also borrow equipment. Maybe you have some family friends who are nurses or other healthcare practitioners who actually wouldn't mind kind of, borrowing or lending you their equipment for you to borrow, or maybe you can even purchase, some of that equipment at a cheaper cost than buying it brand new. You can also do things like ask the students who are in the class above you, 1 or 2 years ahead of you, if they're willing to part with any of their gear, and maybe you can pick it up cheap that way. That can be something that is quite good to do. Now when it comes to you've gathered up all your equipment, one of the things to realize is that trying to gather up equipment that's a little bit more inexpensive is a pretty good way to go about it, because when it comes to your equipment for PT school, like it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to work. And you just need to kind of use the equipment you have that gets you through PT school, because likely when you're actually, you've got your job as a licensed physical therapist within a clinic, that type of equipment is going to be supplied for you. Or again, at that point, you can afford to kind of, maybe purchase some higher end equipment if you want. But again, that's all up to you. It's not that this stuff is really expensive and is going to break the bank, but it's kind of nice to be able to save money however you need to, while you're in PT school. All right, everyone. So that's the gear that, most students are going to need to purchase for themselves when they're going into PT school. Now, as I've said before, every school is a bit different. So if you feel that I've left something out, or your school required you to purchase something else that I haven't talked about, leave it in the comment section below, because it'd be really kind of neat to hear about what other people's experiences were about what they had to supply for themselves, or maybe what their schools supplied for them. All right, so that's it for today's video. Short and sweet and to the point. Hopefully you got something useful out of it. Hopefully it was informative to you. And with that being said, we'll see you guys in the next video.